We're going to move on now to the keynote, and Peter Pisters is going to speak with us, deliver the keynote. Most of you heard Peter at the dinner last night. Some great comments from Peter then, and we're lucky to have even more. When Peter and I talked about this session, one thing I asked Peter to think about was some examples at MD Anderson of things that were innovative, impactful, and portable and scalable, so the rest of us perhaps see the hope in some of the things that are being accomplished there. Peter's been president of MD Anderson since 2017. That's right. Already having a huge impact, and a great scientist, oncologist, and administrator. Peter? Thanks.
Thank you so much, Bill. Great to be with all of you. After that inspiring call to action, now we can move to the front lines and really think, as Bill said, just about what it is that we want to do. And I can give you some examples that come from MD Anderson. So here's the agenda of what I hope to cover with you, just to show you the strategic plan that we formulated, a little bit about how we did that, and especially what we plan to do as an institution as we move into the future of oncology care delivery. And then give you some examples of what I would describe as disruptive biologic innovation that allows us to lower the cost of treatment, improve the efficacy of treatment, and allow, hopefully, us to scale up treatment. So I'm going to give you an example of our CAR-NK program and what we've accomplished with that. Along the way, we'll double down on some of the things that we talked about yesterday, especially the equity issue, and I'll show you exactly how we plan to address that in our own backyard. Now, just some orientation on MD Anderson. I know all of you are familiar with it, and probably some of you are aware of our #1 status. What's more important, I think, to us and to our future is the recognition that we've received just this year from Forbes. And it shows our commitment to be a great large employer. We have 23,000 employees. It shows our commitment to be a great in-state employer. It especially shows our commitment to women and to new graduates. That's important to us because 68% of our workforce are women and 54% are Generation Y. And if you think about it in those terms, you can understand exactly how important it is for us to be a great employer for women and for young people. Because, as I said last night, it's the young people that will have the new ideas for the old problems that we're still trying to solve together. Here are some numbers to ground your understanding of the institution. We have a $1 billion annual investment in research. I think that's an important fact to walk away from. And it's something that we think about all the time as we think about how to focus that investment and how to create the most impact for humanity. On the far right, you can see the impact of our clinical trials engine. 1,600 clinical trials open now at MD Anderson. You can see that we're at the threshold of enrolling 10,000 patients per year into clinical trials. It's very important to what we do and how we commit to the body of knowledge on oncology and to important professional societies and meetings that I know that you all attend. As we think about that, what we've seen, particularly in the wake of the pandemic and the staffing shortages that relate to data coordinators, research nurses, many cancer centers across the country have shut down clinical research or reduced enrollment because they don't have the staffing. Thankfully, we've adjusted. Our clinical trials accrual are up by 20% over the last year as a real demonstration of our commitment to have impact in the setting of the staffing shortages that are very material and impacting the ability to enroll patients in clinical trials nationwide. Now, one thing that we try to illustrate definitively is what is the impact of treatment in a cancer center environment, and how is that different than perhaps care elsewhere? And what you're looking at is the stage-specific survival with long-term follow-up of patients with colorectal cancer. And you're seeing the data in blue for MD Anderson treated patients, and you're seeing the SEER data, which is the national data, and you're seeing the Texas Cancer Registry data minus the MD Anderson cases. And what you're seeing are statistically significant in stage-specific survival for patients with colorectal cancer, even stage 4 disease, treated at MD Anderson. Obviously, these data are not randomized. There are many confounding variables, but the point is that when you get coordinated team-based care in an environment where the diagnosis and stage are secure, you can have excellent outcomes. If you look in a more detailed way and you look at the stage 3 and the stage 1 graphs on the left side of the chart, you can see clearly that stage 3 patients treated at MD Anderson have a survival comparable in many ways to stage 1 patients treated elsewhere. This is a substantial increase in survival, which is 51%. Now, when you look at our commitment to science beyond the investment that we make, there are many ways that you can measure it. On the left, you could measure in terms of federal grant support. The peer review system is one surrogate that we use to really evaluate the quality of ideas that are coming out of an institution. You could look at it in terms of another endpoint that's important to society. That's oncology drug approvals, where over time, 55% of oncology drug approvals come through MD Anderson in one way, shape, or form. So it's literally true that today, on Wednesday, there are patients receiving treatment at MD Anderson that will be approved by the FDA in 6 months or a year. You can look at it in terms of our investment in new platforms that help us to understand the future of oncology. Things like cellular therapy, something I'll talk about in a moment, or the microbiome. Who would have thought 15 years ago that the bacteria in our GI tracts would influence human health or response to immunotherapy? That's what we understand now, and that's why we're making deep investments that include collecting stool samples from patients during treatment at MD Anderson. It includes our deep investment in research platforms like our IACS or ORBIT, platforms that allow us to have, in essence, our own small molecule development teams and antibody production teams so we can develop our own compounds in addition to those that pharma provides in partnership with us. And of course, as academics, we like to measure publications. And if you filter for high-impact publications, and you use an extreme filter, an impact factor of greater than 20, so that would be journals like Cell, Science, Nature, New England Journal of Medicine. We're publishing last year 350 high-impact publications at an impact factor greater than 20. So literally, every day, people are going online, looking at table of contents and seeing practice-changing, high-impact work that comes from our commitment to science at MD Anderson. Now, I was talking a little bit about strategy and how important it is for all organizations and businesses. When we think about our future, we talk internally about these puzzle pieces that we've worked to assemble as an organization. The strategic plan, which is very important, and I'll talk about that in a moment. The master facilities framework, so that we have the environment that allows discovery and outstanding clinical care, inspiration, and hope to occur for cancer patients and their family. The financial plan that ensures that we have the cash flows and the investments to make in the strategic ideas and in the environment of the future. And of course, we're marrying that to a comprehensive philanthropic campaign of about $3 billion that allows us to really galvanize the support from the philanthropic community who also wants us to end cancer. Now, as we do that, we're really trying to accomplish this. This aim statement that you see here, this aspirational statement, is embedded in our strategic plan. It anchors the entire plan, our commitment to maximize our impact on humanity. This graph appears on page 8 of our strategic plan. It guides many decisions that we make because we're trying to get into the upper outer quadrant of this graph. In fact, that's what the CEO Roundtable is trying to do also in many ways. So we can see that our goals and aspirations are completely aligned. When we go through often the process of curating and cultivating great ideas at MD Anderson, we have no shortage of great ideas. We have very gifted and talented faculty who have phenomenal ideas for the future. We plot them on this graph. And when we're trying to make binary decisions for investments, we can plot out exactly on the graph where option A and option B sit, and we can make a transparent decision about why we're going with B instead of A. We use this graph for what we call impact-oriented hiring. In many organizations and universities, hiring is delegated to department chairs. We decided as an organization we don't have time to do that. We're trying to create impact. We created a task force of scientists, and when we hire individuals in research positions, they use this graph. That task force, which is outside the construct of an academic department, recruits the best and the brightest people who want to join our team. Then we rank order them after a committee has reviewed them. And as a second step, we then say, okay, well, which department might be the academic home for this person? And when you take hiring out of academic departments that have their own initiative, their own strategic plan, and you put it instead in the hands of a task force that's led by a Nobel laureate, you're in a position to hire the best and the brightest. And when you're transparent about it with the organization, everyone understands what is it that we're trying to accomplish. How are we going through a process to add the best people to our team? So this impact-oriented hiring ends up being super important for our future. We went through a strategic planning process and we landed on these three themes. They're defined by single words. In many ways, it's very simple. It's also elegant in many ways because these themes, reach, breakthroughs, and value, are self-explanatory. Frontline individuals in our organization can understand it, and we can communicate it effectively internally and externally. In many ways, these themes are timeless because, as you might imagine, we're never going to stop trying to extend our reach. We're always going to be seeking breakthroughs and always finding ways to deliver better, high-touch, high-value care to patients. And for this reason, the strategic plan is really not known internally as Strategy 2028. It will be adjusted dynamically over time as conditions change and science evolves. But this sets our path for the future. Now, to these three themes, we've mapped 23 decisions that we went through a process of formulating. In academic organizations, you can't do strategic planning like you might do at Ford Motor Company. If you were at Ford and you wanted to electrify the F-150, a small team of people could decide that was a good idea. The board could engage in that dialogue back and forth, and then a task force would be told, you have 90 days to bring a plan back to us. It doesn't work like that in academic organizations. We needed a process that was inclusive because the good ideas at MD Anderson and many other places are not confined to a small number of individuals. They are in the minds of really talented and gifted people who want to be involved and engaged in the process. So we developed an inclusive process to formulate these 23 decisions. 3,000 of our teammates engaged in the planning process, including our 1,800 faculty. But also, we developed a process to reach right down to the front lines because we knew that a frontline nurse would have really good ideas about how to improve her day-to-day work. And if she can see ways in which we have really removed a lot of the barriers, the pebbles in her shoe, then we can see traction on the back end. So now that we've launched the strategic plan, 3,000 people have contributed to it. Guess what? It's known internally as our strategy. Uppercase O and uppercase S. It's specifically not known as the McKinsey plan, and it's definitely not known as Peter's plan. That ends up being super important because everyone understands, hey, we developed this together. The term we use internally is co-created. That ends up being so important on the back end when you want to execute, particularly when you've made binary decisions as part of the planning process. And certain stakeholders who wanted to see their idea advance into the plan have realized that we use the impact graph to decide to do something different. So this is really an important aspect of how we're going to define our future. I want to give you some insights into a couple of examples from these themes. Now, as we work on equity, which if you study the 23 decisions, you would see it built in to every one of the themes, One of the most important things that we've been doing is to expand outside the Texas Medical Center so we could reach more diverse populations, including positioning our facilities and campuses around metropolitan Houston in areas that are close to underserved communities. A big part of our commitment is at the Safety Net Hospital, operated by Harris Health System at LBJ in the northeast corner of Houston. It sits at a series of neighborhoods where you see individuals that we've been talking about yesterday that we are trying to reach. It's an example of how an elite organization, if you think of us that way, is leaning in to the Safety Net Hospital that's in our backyard. Now, in Harris County, we have this amazing paradox where we have the county that has the largest number of uninsured people in the nation. 1 million people in Harris County do not have access to the front door of American medicine. In this same county, you have the #1 cancer center in the nation. What an amazing paradox. This is the conversation I've had internally with our team as we've been thinking about what is our responsibility? What is our obligation? How are we going to address this? This is right in our own backyards. And so one of the most important things that we've done is to think about how we can expand our presence at the LBJ Hospital. For 20 years, 2 decades, we've operated the oncology clinic. And what we've done now, and hopefully I can come back in a year or two to provide all the detail for the small snippet I'm about to share now, is to find ways to deepen our commitment at LBJ Hospital, at the Safety Net Hospital. What we've lined up right now is a partnership between the community and the cancer center to serve the underserved. The way this works is that we have a $50 million lead gift from a donor. Our Chief Development Officer and I have lined up another $20 million. The University of Texas Board of Regents has allowed me to invest $70 million of our resources. We will get $140 million, and we will build a cancer center at the Safety Net Hospital. It will be purpose-built to our standards. We know how to do this because we built all around metropolitan Houston. It will include oncology imaging, diagnostics, radiation oncology, clinic space, pharmacy. And it will allow us to really bring a broader group of faculty to meet the needs of the underserved in a way that is totally innovative, that shows a model that demonstrates clearly that the community cares about the underserved and the cancer center is willing to lean in and really help out. That partnership, you can see some of the metrics on the side, has allowed us to treat 5,700 patients who don't have insurance, who don't have access, and has allowed us to create a training environment for our GME programs. In our cancer medicine, medical oncology fellowship program, the LBJ rotation is the highest ranked rotation in the entire fellowship. Our trainees find the educational experience there better than being with the world experts at the Texas Medical Center campus. That's the experience that we've created. That's the educational environment. That's the training benefit associated with exposing young people, young trainees, to this type of environment. It's something that we are incredibly proud of, that we're deepening our investment in. When we look at our commitment to the underserved, it boils down to the things that you see listed on this slide. Our commitment to investment, access, outreach, and delivery of care. On the investment side, one of the things that I did when I came back immediately was to create a $200 million endowment that allows us to continually invest in programming for the underserved. We've expanded access through the model that partners the Cancer Center with Safety Net Hospital in Harris County. And we've committed to a series of very important outreach programs that I can describe an example of in just a moment. And we're working in a variety of ways to expand our community outreach and engagement because it's so important to our mission. One of the most important programs that we have is what we call Be Well Communities. It's a community-based or place-based program that brings important components of anti-cancer living, if we think about it that way. Things like diet, exercise, the importance of sun safety or UV exposure in the southern environment that we're in, and the importance of prevention, screening, and tobacco control. As we've done that, you can see some of the impact associated with these programs on the right, some of the important metrics that we use to measure the efficacy of this program. This reaches many of the neighborhoods in the east part of Houston that are served by the LBJ Hospital, where you experience the challenges of these communities. You see the food desert. You see the day-to-day challenges that these individuals face. And by bringing programs to them, by helping them to solve their problems, by meeting them on their terms, by understanding the gaps that we're trying to close for them, we can really create a dramatic impact. In the last part of my talk today, I want to cover an important area of what I described earlier as disruptive biologic innovation. And it relates to our CAR-NK program. This is really a follow-on in many ways to CAR-T therapy. I know probably all of you are familiar with CAR-T therapy and how it works. It's basically designed to take lymphocytes, T cells, from cancer patients, engineer those T cells to better fight cancer, and then to infuse those lymphocytes back into the patient. It's very effective. It's game-changing treatment. It's been dramatic in so many ways that are so impactful. At MD Anderson, in fact, we're going to announce it today, we just treated our 1,000th patient with CAR-T therapy to give you some idea of the impact that it's had. We'll have a press release. There will be an email from me talking about patient number 1,000. That patient was treated in August. We have long-term follow-up. We know that patient is doing great. And it shows you the impact that this has and how it's really been scaled up in many ways in organizations like ours. CAR-T has challenges, however, and I know some of you are familiar with them. It's very toxic. You need to have access to an intensive care unit because sometimes patients crash and they need an ICU bed immediately. You need teams that know how to recognize the decompensation. You need ICU availability. You need support teams to help out. The treatment causes graft versus host disease. That's a real challenge when the lymphocytes start attacking normal tissues. And then we have the issue of cost. When you look at the drug cost, let's say $475,000, you look at the implementation costs, the ICU bed stay, you're over $1 million when you're all in. It's not scalable. That's the fundamental problem that we have. So when we look at the list of issues that I just described, including the patient specificity associated with the approach that we currently have, the economic cost, the graft versus host disease, the implementation challenges, there's a real need to look at different ways of doing this. Now, when we look at the societal need, beyond cost, we need something that can be given on an outpatient basis. That would be great, wouldn't it? We need something that's definitely lower cost because 1.2 million, probably not scalable, especially to the populations that we want to reach over time. We don't really like this graft versus host disease. It's really a pain to match, and it's very troublesome for patients who experience it, who have to be on steroids for long periods of time, have to be on other medications, have lots of doctor's visits, many, many symptoms attributable to that. So there's a real need to innovate. So one of the ideas that our researchers had was that if you think of T cells as the soldiers of the immune system, then natural killer cells could be thought of as the cruise missiles of the immune system. They're very good at killing, better than T cells, in fact. The problem with using NK cells is that you can't clonally expand them. That's a problem, and that's been a barrier over time. So our researchers looked at the opportunities, and they did what academics do, which is to say, well, we have a source for NK cells. We could use cord blood samples that come from the umbilical cord bank that we have at MD Anderson. That cord blood bank is used to provide individuals who don't have a match bone marrow transplants. It can also be used for research purposes. And our researchers said, oh, we could go to the cord blood bank and we could get NK cells and we could genetically engineer them and we could clonally expand them. That's our idea. They wrote a grant and went through the peer review process at the NCI. And you know what our researchers were told? That can't be done. Don't you know? Grant wasn't funded. The teams came back to us. They explained the idea. They explained why they believe they can do it. They explained why they believe the reviewers at the NCI were wrong. And we said, that's why we exist. We are an organization that invests in high-risk, high-reward projects. So we went ahead to create this program. It was based off of the cord blood bank, where we could really take an off-the-shelf approach. We could genetically engineer CAR NKs. We could clonally expand them using our own proprietary technology. NK cells have a lot of advantages. In addition to being more effective at killing cancer cells, for immunologic reasons, NK cells don't cause graft versus host disease. So if we could create a process by which we could create genetically engineered cord blood-derived CAR NK cells and infuse them into patients, that would be amazing going forward. That's exactly what we did. And in 3 years, we had a clinical trial that could go into human patients. That timeline is unbelievable when you look at the timeline for discovery and you look at how long it takes basic science observations to reach the clinic. So if you were thinking about what kind of clinical trial could you design to test a therapy that had never been used in cancer patients before? Well, you certainly couldn't do it as first-line therapy. You'd have to provide this treatment to patients who were going to die, who failed multiple bone marrow transplants, who had no other options. And then we could say to those patients, you know what? We have one other idea. Would you enter this clinical trial? And these patients had failed therapy. They had PET scans like this, where you can see disease everywhere. You can see it in the axillary lymph nodes. You can see it in the cervical lymph nodes. You can see it in the thorax. You can see it in the abdomen. You can see it in the groins. There's cancer everywhere, and it's not controlled by CAR T therapy, by other types of therapy, by bone marrow transplantation. This is the whole-body PET scan. We designed a dose escalation study with the CAR NK treatment. And here's what the scans look like 30 days later. You see physiologic uptake in the brain, in the kidneys, and the collecting system in the bladder. You see no cancer. There was no graft versus host disease I've seen in these patients, and almost no toxicity. 0 grade 3 or grade 4 toxicity. So in the conversations that we had with the FDA as we moved patients through this trial, this was subsequently published in the New England Journal of Medicine, and we've expanded this program in a variety of ways that I'm going to describe in a moment. We said to them, you know what? We think we could give this on an outpatient basis. They looked at the toxicity data and they said, well, it certainly looks that way. There's no grade 3 or grade 4 toxicity. The treatment is very effective. Because of this work, other institutions are looking closely at CAR NK programs, and several companies have CAR NK programs because they understand the benefits associated with that. We realized that we were onto something big and that we needed to find ways in which we could take it onto a larger platform. So we worked in partnership with Takeda and are working now in a symbiotic relationship where we can take our technology, our research team, and Takeda's team to come to work together, and then Takeda has the capabilities to scale it up onto larger scale clinical trials. So now we're working in a variety of different ways. When we designed this relationship with Takeda, we knew that there were opportunities to expand over time. The work is led by some of our most talented researchers, parenthetically, 2 women. And that is really an example of how we're doing this. Now, when we look at the issues that we talked about at the very beginning, you look at the efficacy, you look at the cost. We believe that we can do this at a per-patient cost of $50,000 per patient. That's the cost in our own GMP facility. I don't mean to suggest that that would be Takeda's price, but I'm telling you, we can do this at a per-patient cost that's an order of magnitude different than standard CAR-T therapy. So what we need right now in society is ways that we can take these innovative treatments, we can create disruptive biologic innovation, we can make this less toxic, less expensive, and more efficacious. So here are my final thoughts. Hopefully you can see that what we've developed as an institution is a commitment to retain our #1 status, to push us towards high impact, to align ourselves with the goals that we've been talking about in this meeting, and with an aim statement that really describes our commitment to humanity. You'll see our commitment to the underserved exemplified by the challenge that we have in our own backyard, by something that we will be so proud to roll out, something that we will talk to Monica and the team at the NCI about, because this is novel, it's innovative, and it could be used to create a new tier of cancer centers in the future going forward. You want cancer centers around the country to partner in innovative ways, and this is a model that could be scaled up in very important ways. As we talked to the lead donor, we said, this is so inspiring that you want to do this to help our community. Other philanthropists may be similarly inspired, and they might say, I'd like to do the same thing for diabetes or for heart failure going forward. So it is an amazing opportunity that we have. And we are working in a variety of ways to focus our $1 billion annual investment to have the kind of impact that we've been talking about. I'm so privileged to be with all of you today and so proud to be a board member here. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Would you like to take a couple of questions?
Sure.
It'll take about 10 minutes.
Okay, sure.
Yes. Peter will take a couple of questions. That's dynamite stuff. Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that vision. It's very inspirational. So I represent Janssen and oncology clinical development, obviously working closely with many of the researchers on your staff. I was just wondering, as you look at that LBJ hospital and trying to bring trials, to that point of care, what are some of the types of resources that you're looking from oncology sponsors to do to support that effort? Because that clearly is a perfect way to address some of the problems, the disproportionate access to clinical trials. I'm just wondering about some of your thoughts about how do we support that, build that infrastructure that can facilitate achieving that goal.
Thank you for that question, Craig. It's a very good one. We've been thinking a lot about that, and we've received tremendous interest in this project for reasons that are, I think, implicit in your question. One of the models that we're thinking about would be one where we could have a rotating series of companies that would lean in for short periods of time. So if Janssen would commit to 2 years of support, that would provide an opportunity for us to have another company step in after that. It would avoid a series of conflicts of interest that might arise in situations where there's a single company making a long-term investment, and where we could say, we've got a lot of companies that want to help us do this. We don't have a preferred relationship with anybody. We have a rotating system where everyone in our industry community leans in to help us. So we're working to try to develop an approach that would be like that would free us of a variety of risks associated with doing that. And we'd love to be able to work with you and others here in the room to think this through in a deeper way going forward. We know we can't do it alone. we've got to do things through collaboration and through partnerships. And we've got to really understand a lot of the barriers to enrollment that go beyond having a facility in your community. Proximity is a necessary first step, but it's not everything. We've got to solve for some of the other things like transportation, daycare, health literacy. These are things that we've really got to focus on intently. We know we can do that in a variety of ways.
Hi, again, Rochelle Ford from Dillard University. This is so exciting to see what you're doing, and I looked at your website with the community outreach effort, so kudos to all that you're doing. How have you engaged the HBCUs, particularly Houston-Tillotson, which is right in your backyard there, and some of the others? Well, actually, they're in Austin, but but some of the others that are in the Texas community, and also how are you engaging university communications programs that might be able to help with the communications outreach, particularly into underrepresented populations?
Terrific question, and so important. As part of the execution of the strategic plan, we're looking closely at the important issues that you raise in understanding the value of the HBCUs that are in our own community. Texas has over 50 Hispanic serving institutions and 7 or 8 certainly HBCUs. Developing strategic relationships is important as we move this forward, and thinking about it for workforce planning is really the big initiatives that we have underway right now. Because of the large deficit of healthcare workers, the exodus that occurred during the pandemic, there's a need for us to have a strategic approach to workforce development in the future, and that will really involve pipelines that come from a variety of community colleges over time, and investments on our part to ensure that we can bring a workforce into MD Anderson that reflects the diversity of Houston. Some of you might not know, but Houston is the most diverse city in America, and we have a workforce that really reflects that diversity and a commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion that is palpable in the organization. That extends right up to my team, where when I took over in 2017, I walked into the room and I sat down, and there was a table filled with men. And I was quiet for a moment, and the first thing I said was, "There's a lot of testosterone in the room." And the second thing I said was, "That's going to have to change." And I put them on notice. So fast forward 5 years, and now we have our clinical enterprise, which generates 80% of our revenue, led by an African-American woman from Ethiopia and a Hispanic nurse. So you got a doctor and a nurse, African-American and Hispanic, both amazing women leaders leading the clinical enterprise. We have an amazing female leader as chief academic officer, amazing general counsel, incredible woman leader that are all part of my team. My chief of staff, Muslim woman. Signal to the organization, it matters to me. And the change that's happening is reflected everywhere.
Thank you, Dr. Pisters. I'm Jude Ngang from Amgen, and I also work with a lot of your colleagues in the design and execution of clinical trials. I was very encouraged with not only your approach where you have actually increased the workforce, which most institutions are facing, but can you share us more about what are the things that you've done to increase the accrual in clinical trials, which you mentioned by about 20% since the pandemic?
The overall accrual or accrual of underrepresented minorities?
Overall accrual.
Yeah, we've been creative in a number of different ways. As probably all of you know, this has been a challenge on a national scale, and it slows down innovation, and it's a barrier to accrual. We've done that really by saying to our workforce, particularly our faculty, we're going to have to find ways of working differently. We've signaled to them this won't be permanent, but if we want to continue our commitment, we're all going to have to work differently. And we've distributed some of that workload. We've put into place innovations like remote consenting. So all of a sudden, you didn't have to have a face-to-face contact to enroll a patient in a clinical trial. You could do that in a compliant way over Zoom. And that allowed a research nurse to be at home and enroll patients in a clinical trial during the pandemic. So thinking about different ways of working, distributing some of the work has really helped us to increase enrollment by 20%. And as our faculty, most of the important things I have to do are make sure they're not living in a terrarium and that they can understand, hey, it's not like this everywhere. We need to work differently if we're going to have impact. So that's really how we've done it right now. I'm so proud of our teams and what they've been able to accomplish in the face of tremendous headwinds. Because implicit in your question are the headwinds that are facing academic medicine right now. They definitely include inflation, supply chain, and labor.
Yes.
Hi, Victoria.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It was very inspirational. So I'm Victoria Zazulina, and I represent a company, pharmaceutical company, which is based in Europe. We do have offices in the US, EMD Serono, or German Merck KGaA. So my question was around your ambition and mission to transform the cancer care on the all humanity level. And in that context, I wanted to understand from your backyard in Houston, Texas, going on a broader scale to other institutions, maybe in some remote regions outside of the US. Is there something you are planning already engaging to transport your expertise, basically, to transmit all the knowledge and the ambition to other centers?
Well, thank you, Victoria. It's a great question. I didn't have a slide of our mission statement, but if I did, you would see our commitment to eradicating cancer in Texas, in the United States, and around the world. So we have a commitment to global programming that's implicit in our mission statement, which is very important. As we went through the strategic planning process, we spent a lot of time talking about our international programming. And if you think about that, it covers a wide spectrum. From one opportunity that we discussed is maybe we should build 25 cancer centers around the world. We'd have 15 in China, we'd have 10 in India, we'd have a few in sub-Saharan Africa, several in the Middle East. And that would be our commitment to global programming. On the other end of the spectrum, we talked about what I was referring to last night. That would be opportunities to partner in ways that also have impact, such as UICC, WHO, organization to government over time. And in the middle, you have what we currently have, or what we've historically had, which are a lot of sister institution relationships. Over time, I think we've learned that sister institution relationships are not very efficient. They don't have dramatic impact. And we stress tested this with our faculty. As you might imagine, faculty like them because they frequently establish them in their home country. They often establish them with friends. They're very good for nice dinners with wine, but there's not a lot of impact associated with them. And we basically reached an endpoint where we said, we're going to decrease the number of sister institution relationships that we have because they don't fit on the graph. They don't have impact. We're going to move to the far extreme and really try to create impact through partnerships with WHO and UICC. We're not going to build co-branded cancer centers because it's very expensive. It's a different work environment. The regulatory and legal constraints are different in other countries, and we can't protect our brand. That was really the thinking behind that. And we realized we don't have unlimited bandwidth. We better focus on our national network right now, where we understand the regulatory environment, the reimbursement environment, and where legal issues can be sorted out in U.S. courts. So the net of it is that we're doubling down on our national network. Our international programming will really consist of these partnerships. We just announced one about 3 weeks ago with the WHO with women's cancers, where we're going to take our expertise in women's cancers, put it onto the chassis that the WHO already has in a variety of countries. So we don't duplicate their expertise, we leverage it over time. Along with that, we decided that we wanted to create a best-in-class inbound international patient program. We don't have that today. Some of you that have been to MD Anderson know what I'm talking about. Our setup for international patients, which represent about 4% of our patients, is very good, but it's not like the Cleveland Clinic. Cleveland Clinic is like that for many reasons. The first is that their market is shrinking, and they need to find ways. They have excess capacity that they can dedicate to that. Our market is increasing. 1,000 people per day are moving to Texas right now. So we're going to have more cancer. Our population is going from 28 million to 45 million. We have plenty of business in our own backyard. We have challenges meeting the needs of our own market. We're going to have to expand capacity so we can build the inbound international patient program that's part of the plan.
Peter, thank you. It was fantastic. Thank you. That was great. Thank you.